Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. It's time for the C3 stream. All right, good evening. Hello, welcome to the Tuesday night teaching C3 stream, guys. Glad to have you all here. Hello. Tonight, I'm drinking some hot tea. Evening in Missoula again. Super good. I have a question to start it off. The question is, trivia question tonight, guys. We got a trivia question tonight. What was the biggest issue between the Old Testament and New Testament? This is multiple choice. A, bacon. B, Zeus, or C, aliens? What was the biggest issue that came to the center stage between the Old and New Testaments? Bacon, Zeus, or aliens? Hey, Sturgy! Hey, Jesus is the answer. Sunday school, Jesus. What's the answer, boys and girls? Jesus, right? Isn't that the Sunday school answer to everything? It doesn't matter what it is. Christians, isn't that what we're supposed to say, is Jesus to everything? How you doing, buddy? Hope you're doing well. If that's a tag, Betsy, would love to have you come hang out with us, Betsy. Melissa's throwing out there bacon as a possibility. She's putting a question mark on there. So far, we got a vote for bacon. Shout out to Aaron Sturgis and his new YouTube channel, which just published another video. I have it tagged, but I haven't watched it yet, bud. But I'll get to it. Whenever a pastor asks you the question, yes, that's so true. Whenever a pastor asks you a question, the answer is always Jesus. That's so true. That's so true. Now, here you go. So we are going to be studying tonight the intertestamental. How do you like this? Is a 10-cent word. This is why I went to seminary, so that I could tell you this big fancy word, intertestamental. What is the intertestamental period, you ask? Oh, I'm so glad you asked, because tonight we will be studying the intertestamental period, which is a really fancy word big scholars use to say between the Old and the New Testament. What happens in your Bible, right? When you look at your Bible, you go to the table of contents, and it will usually be referred to as the Old and New. If you're looking at a Hebrew Bible, it'll just be the Hebrew Scriptures, which Christians refer to as the Old Testament. But, what happens between the Old and the New Testament? We are on week 21 of walking through the Bible, nice and slow, taking our time, nice stroll, right? It's like a nice casual stroll that we've been on. And we have gone all the way through the Old Testament, basically. Taking a narrative look, story-based look at the Bible. Oh, we got some more votes for bacon. Bacon sounds good. And an emoji bacon. Didn't know there was an emoji bacon. I didn't know that. I shouldn't be surprised by that. All right, keep getting your votes. No votes for Zeus and no votes for aliens. Trivia question, what was the biggest issue that came to the forefront between the Old Testament and New Testament? So far, bacon has a strong lead. A commanding lead for bacon right now. I could go for some bacon. Mark, so now that we're talking about bacon, you're all going to be like, yeah, bacon, that sounds great. Let's get some bacon on there. That's right. It's the image of the sheet that stands out for me. Image of the sheet? Image of the sheet. Was that a graphic that we looked at together? Or are you talking about like one of the visions? I'm thinking of like Cornelius's vision where the sheet comes down. Is that what you're talking about, Melissa? The image of the sheet? Tell me more. Yeah, coming down with all the unclean animals. Yeah. Okay, all right. She's onto something there. She knows what's up. She's chasing down a lead. Yes, you're talking about in the vision with Cornelius. That's very good. Bacon Bacon is a good... wow, you guys like globbed onto bacon right away. No votes for Zeus. No votes for aliens. What was the biggest issue that came to the forefront and caused a whole lot of messiness between the Old and New Testament? Still taking votes. A, bacon. B, Zeus. C, aliens. Bacon, Zeus, or aliens? Still taking votes. Throw it in the comments for me. As you're doing that, let me again welcome you to the C3 stream. Glad to have you on tonight. We're doing Tuesday night teaching. It's a lot of fun. If this is your first time or however many time, clearly aliens. All right, aliens is taking a vote now. Aliens. First one, not bacon. We got to vote for aliens. That's why we're in Mars. That's right. Yeah, the Mars landing. That was a big deal, right? You guys all saw that that's been in the news a ton. So we're on week 21, and it took us basically 20 weeks to walk through the Old Testament. And you can always go back onto YouTube. You can always go back into Facebook if you're on my personal page or the community page at Christ Church community page, and you can rewatch those. If you go to the YouTube page, you can watch all of these on a playlist that I drop into a playlist for the C3 stream called Tuesday Night Teaching. So still taking votes. What's the biggest issue? Bacon, Zeus, aliens. Right now, bacon is in a demanding, clear lead, a commanding lead, and then you have one for aliens. All right. So far, so good. Are you guys ready to jump on in? Are you guys ready to find out what the answer is? Let me do my fancy intro, because, like, you know, why not? It's so cool. All right. Let's find out. Let's dive in between the testaments tonight. So glad to have you here for the C3 stream. Yep. There you go. All right, this is where we left off. We left off with kind of like we left off with the reality of a very I don't know what, depressing, but like not super. So reminders and recap for you. Trudy says absolutely. Trudy, which one are you? Are you affirming the aliens? Maybe a second vote for aliens, Trudy? We're still taking votes. Which is the biggest issue that came to the forefront of the biblical narrative between the time of the Old Testament and the New Testament? Is it A, bacon, B, Zeus, or C, aliens? Bacon is in the lead. Take a vote if you haven't voted yet. So where we left off is in this story how God had used what we refer to as the exile or the Babylonian captivity, and used the... Ready to go. She's ready to go. That's what you're saying. Good deal. God had used the Babylonian captivity, which was a time and period where the Jewish people were dominated by a foreign empire and foreign power, the Babylonian Empire. Bear in mind, if you go back even farther, there was an empire before that called the Assyrian Empire that came on through and just laid waste to the northern part of what was the northern kingdom of Israel, and all that's left is the Jews down south in the kingdom of Judah. They get sent off to Babylon, packed up. All the influential, wealthy craftsmen, political royalty, upper class, they all got shipped off to Babylon. And the poor people, the destitute, the old, the infirmed remain in Jerusalem. Eventually, as we looked at last week, hey, now we got to vote for Zeus. Zeus is on the board. Zeus is taking a move. All right, we got at least a vote for each one. You can still vote. Which one? A, bacon. B, Zeus. C, aliens. So where we left off, though, was how God, even though he had sent them into this period of exile, had gone throughout history and brought them back to a place of really healing and reconciliation, where despite the fact that the temple had been razed and destroyed, he brought them back in a few waves. If you remember this, we talked about this last week. He brought them back in a couple different waves, and under the leadership first of a guy named Zerubbabel. Say that 10 times fast. Zerubbabel. For Zerubbabel was the first one back, and he rebuilt the temple. Then after that came Ezra. Ezra has a book in the Bible. Another vote for Zeus. Zeus has 2 on the board. Ezra has a book of the Bible, and it describes him coming back. Ezra was a priest, and he, kind of brought to the forefront the Jewish faith in the same way that Zerubbabel brought to the forefront the importance of the temple. You can find out more about Zerubbabel not only in the book of Ezra, but you can find out more about Zerubbabel in Haggai and Zechariah, 2 of the prophets that were active at that time. So Zerubbabel builds the temple. Ezra starts to build the faith, really. I mean, that's really kind of what his thing is. He builds the faith of the Jewish people back. They have returned out of exile, and now they have a temple. Now they have a priest named Ezra who's bringing them back into the Word. He's getting them into the Torah. He's getting into all of the goodness of what it means to be faithful Jewish people. And then you have Nehemiah. Nehemiah comes back as well in another wave of people from Babylon. Interesting note, Nehemiah actually ends up going back after. He comes to Jerusalem, and then he actually goes back to Babylon. Fascinating. But while he's in Jerusalem, he spends time building up the city of Jerusalem, specifically the walls of Jerusalem. So Jerusalem doesn't become just simply this little pitiful town anymore that had been decimated by this ancient empire. But in fact, with walls, it became an actual influence in the area. It became once again a substantial city that moved to a position of power in the area. It wasn't just this little rinky-dink leftover ruins of a town, but now with walls, with the temple, with the Jewish people kind of getting a reinvigorated faith. Hey, Zeus is making great ground. All right, Zeus. Last 4 votes have all been for Zeus. Okay. Someone else is, Zeus. Greek influence, question mark. Ooh, very good, very good. We'll be talking about that tonight. You can still vote. It is still time. If you want to vote, you can vote. Which has the most significance in between the Old and New Testament? Bacon, Zeus, or aliens? Bacon, Zeus, or aliens? Right now, Bacon and Zeus have they're getting hot and heavy, throwing blows back and forth, and aliens is still hiding in the background. So that's kind of where we left off, though, was the Jewish people have resettled. They have reestablished their ancient city, Jerusalem, as the heartbeat of the epicenter of the Jewish, I don't want to say ethnicity, but the Jewish, more than just simply faith, like the Jewish culture, people. Maybe a better word, people. Because the epicenter of the Jewish faith is, once again, the temple. Temple has moved, again, to the forefront. Now, bear in mind, while they were in exile, the importance of the scriptures took forefront. Specifically, they went from an oral tradition to a written tradition in exile. They wrote a whole bunch of stuff down when they were stuck in exile. They're like twiddling their thumbs, don't know what to do. Let's write everything down so we don't forget. So they wrote a ton of stuff down in Babylon, and this centrality of the scriptures is really what held them to their Jewish identity. They couldn't worship at the temple in Jerusalem, and so they grounded themselves in the Bible, in what they refer to as the Hebrew scriptures, or Torah, the Tanakh. I mean, it was really written down in exile for the most part. So now coming back, they have both their written documents, they have their oral tradition, and they have a fully functioning temple once more, all within the context of Jerusalem being the holy city, kind of coming to the forefront. There you go. That's the recap. Sound pretty good? And that's kind of where it leaves it, Like, that's it. That's kind of where it stops. Now, again, in your Bible, if you go to your Bible and you open up to the table of contents, the Bible is not arranged. The Bible is not arranged. The Bible is not arranged in a chronological order. Bible means library. And just like a library, your Bible is arranged by genre. Okay, like mystery, murder mysteries over there, romance is over there, and fiction, nonfiction. Same thing with the Bible, okay? Same thing with the Bible. You get your historical books over here. You've got your wisdom writings over here. You get your major prophets. You get your minor prophets. Bible's written, it's organized in the same way. So what we're doing and what's more nuanced is we're trying to take that chronological move through it, okay? So this is really kind of the gap then, narratively, in chronology, where all of a sudden the Old Testament kind of ends. Yes, there's like Esther. Esther is a novella. It's like a short story. Esther is like a short story. It has to do with the Persian Empire. That's how we can locate it chronologically. It's a novella that has to do with the Persian Empire. But really, kind of when you move beyond the story of Nehemiah and Ezra in the return, there's a big old gap in the history and in the years until you, for Christians, dive into what we refer to as the New Testament. Okay, the New Testament. For the Hebrew scriptures, for Jewish people, it just ended. It's done. The chronology is done, and it picks up with modern day, so to speak, modern day teachings and rabbis and so forth. But the canon and the chronology of the canon finishes. All right. So that means we're in this fun place. This is the next step. Time to look at empires. So the important thing that you need to recognize in between the Old and the New Testament is actually not necessarily what is happening in ancient Israel, but what is happening around ancient Israel. What is happening around ancient Israel? And it will set up, it will be very important as we move into the New Testament to understand how deeply the Jewish people were shaped in their expectations, so that when Jesus arrives on the scene, it's no wonder that everybody's like, who's up with it? What's up with that dude? They're not looking at Jesus right away and saying, yep, Messiah. He totally confuses them. He subverts their expectations of a Messiah, because their expectations of what a Messiah is and what a Messiah means has been so deeply shaped by their history. And particularly in their recent history, which is what we're about to look at, you will see empire after empire. So, first off, going all the way back, we have the Assyrian Empire. That shows you kind of the scale of the Assyrian Empire on the top left-hand side there. They're the ones that come down, and their goal is to get to Egypt. They want to get to that breadbasket. And they're the ones who conquer the northern kingdom and displace them. They disperse the tribes of Israel all over, right? So we talked about that a couple weeks ago. And then the Babylonians gobble them up, really. And it's following those two big rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris, the Mesopotamian. Got it right this time. It took me how long? It took me so long to... I was like, Mesopotamia? I couldn't do it. Mesopotamia. So when you look at kind of the Fertile Crescent is really what that section is called. Both Assyria and Babylon both move in the same direction. They're moving west towards the Mediterranean Sea, and Babylon gobbles up the falling apart Assyrian Empire. Babylon is the one that finishes what Assyria started and conquers, gobbles up Jerusalem itself, razes it to the ground, sacks the temple, and drags everybody off to captivity. Babylon falls to the Persians. That's what we talked about last week when we got into the conversation with a guy named Daniel. You guys remember Daniel? We talked about Daniel last week. Daniel was in both the Babylonian and the Persian empires. He served in both of those empires. We talked about nations rise, nation fall in the story of Daniel. So Persian Empire comes after, and look at the size of that thing. Dang, it's huge. Huge. Nobody wants the Arabian Peninsula down south because that's all just sand. It's all sand, so nobody bothers with that. They all want to go. It's the ancient world. And in the ancient world, everything's about water because water means crops, fertile, and so fertility is the goal there. And so you can see the Persian Empire is quite large. It's quite substantial. Eventually, the Persian Empire falls to a guy who you studied in, I don't know, high school history. You read a chapter about him. His name was Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great, and his conquest from the Greek, from ancient Greece, the Greek culture and Greek military empire just exploded all over the known world. And you can see in the bottom left hand side it says Greek, and then it says right next to Greek it says two things, the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. And those were when Alexander the Great dies, having conquered this vast territory, immediately following his death, Ptolemies and the Seleucids are fighting each other for his empire. And so it splits into east and west. The eastern side is the Seleucids, the western side is Ptolemies, and they're all still Greek. They're all still Greeks, but they're fighting for really the empire, if you will. So the empire kind of fractures into two parts. Ptolemies is on the western side, and its power base is Egypt. The Seleucids are much more Persian in orientation, in backdrop, and history. Alexander the Great, for example, took a Persian. He made everybody marry Persian. Like, he married a Persian. His generals all had to marry Persians, and that's because when he expanded, he actually went east. Uniquely, he went east, all the way to Afghanistan, if you can believe it. But he expanded eastward, gobbling up the historical Persian Empire. So Ptolemies and the Seleucids are fighting over what Alexander left behind. So far, so good. What's fascinating about this is that inside that Greek Empire and the battle between Ptolemies and the Seleucids, like right at the heart of where their boundaries lay, is Jerusalem. The place that's at the forefront of the Greek violence and civil war. The forefront of that happens in ancient Israel. So they're feeling the full effects of that divergence and split. Now, Alexander the Great originally is very nice to Jews. He actually does very nice. He's very nice to Jews. He's nice to most people. He lets most people do whatever they want in terms of religion. He doesn't really bother them. He's a conqueror, and so he kind of conquers and then moves on. He's not so much a ruling kind of guy. He's kind of like, you can rule yourself, but I'll conquer you. So he's nice to the Jews as a whole. The Seleucids and Ptolemies, though, cause friction for the Jews because the battle lines end up moving around Jerusalem so many times that ancient Jerusalem, 5 to 6 different times, the power authority figure changed during the Greek Civil War. So the Ptolemies regime is in charge in ancient Jerusalem, and then all of a sudden the Seleucids are in charge, and then the Ptolemies are in charge, and then the Seleucids are in charge, then the Ptolemies are in charge. Eventually, at the very end of it, Seleucids are. The Seleucids end up grabbing, so the western side grabs a hold of and finalizes control over Jerusalem. Throughout all of that back and forth, there is a ruling Jewish council, but ancient Israel at this time really is nothing more than a province that everybody fights over. Okay? So it's a province where Jews are like, they're all living and they're there, but the government keeps them in constant flux, constant issues with this whole Greek Civil War thing. Okay, and it gets worse. It gets worse. Once the Seleucids kind of firmly have it in power, things ramp up like crazy. But even before that, when Alexander the Great moves in, and during this whole Civil War stuff, Hellenism, which is the Greek term, Hellenism, Greek culture, that's what Alexander the Great was all about, was spreading Greek culture. That's what he did. He spread Greek culture. Well, if you're Jewish and you get conquered by a guy from Greece, and all of a sudden you're told that you have to start thinking Greek, speaking Greek, and doing the Greek thing, you have to navigate that and see if you can reconcile that with your Jewish faith. The Greek culture and Hellenization was so powerful that it echoes strongly into the New Testament. Okay? So, this would be the time, as an example, where the Old Testament gets translated into Greek. Not many people know that, but the Old Testament, while originally written in Hebrew, is in fact transliterated into Greek, and that was used widely by the early church, because ironically the early church was, in a great part, Greek speaking. The reason why by the time you get to the time of Jesus and going all the way forward into the time of the apostles and the apostle Paul and his travels and everything, he spoke Greek. Everybody spoke Greek. And it goes back to Alexander the Great, who forced everybody to speak Greek. It was all about the Greek culture. Now, that might sound nice in some ways. It's kind of like the federal government has its bonuses, its pros, right? But there's also a lot of cons when you're Jewish. More specifically, as the Greeks came, so did the Greek religion. Okay? So did the Greek religion. So, increasingly, at this time, you found as Greek generals and armies brought Greek culture, they and their families moved in, populated the areas, and so suddenly Jerusalem is filled with all these Greek gods everywhere, and these administrators and these soldiers who are all Greek worshiping Zeus, worshiping the Greek gods. So you have aliens. Ooh, did you see how I did that? Did you see how I did that? Do you get it? Tell me you get it. Tell me you get it. You have aliens from the outside coming in. And what are all these aliens doing? They're worshiping Zeus. So the ultimate example of this, there are a couple big ones that come to the forefront. The first one is that they build a gymnasium. Greeks, big into fitness, Olympics, all that sort of stuff. Now, when you're Greek and you build a gymnasium and you go to your workout, do you know how you work out in ancient cultures? The Greeks worked out in the nude. Naked. They worked out naked. Now, why are we talking about naked Greeks and their workouts related to the ancient Israel and Judaism and the Jewish faith? That would be because Jews are circumcised. There is an immediate, you are ostracized as a Jew. There's an immediate friction with the idea that right next to the temple in ancient Israel in its capital, God's holy city of Jerusalem, that down the street you have a bunch of Zeus-worshipping naked pagans wrestling each other. Okay? This does not sit well. Thank you. Thank you. Someone got it. Alien belonging to a foreign land. Did you get that? So the answer is definitely Zeus became a problem, and aliens were a problem because it was alien peoples, alien culture, alien values and language, and naked Greeks wrestling each other down the street from the Holy Temple. It doesn't jive. It's a no-go. Okay? Then this guy, one specific guy, Seleucid, comes to power. There's a bunch of power changes. There's a bunch of people changes. All this sort of stuff happens. But eventually there's this one guy called Antiochus. Antiochus IV. He comes to power. Okay? And he and his goal to solidify his power is to make everybody Greek. Everybody. So even though he is himself having a backdrop of being Greek, and he is now the ruler of a ancient Israel province, Judea, the province, he's just going to wipe the slate clean. And he's looking at all these Jews that just don't seem to get it. They keep logging complaints with the local city manager about the gym down the street. And he's like, get on board. Dress Greek, think Greek, even Greek philosophy. Like, Jews, what's the problem? Why is this an issue here? Okay? And he goes out of his way to antagonize them. He puts them in a position where these increasingly frustrated Jews are pushed to a point of either getting on board and rowing in the same direction, that is, becoming Greek, or die. So he actually takes a pig, brings it into the Jewish temple, brings it up to the altar, and slaughters it as a sacrifice to Zeus. You want to make a whole lot of Jewish people mad? Bring an unclean animal that they ain't supposed to touch, ain't supposed to eat, ain't supposed to be around, a pig, cloven hooves, bacon, bring it into the most holy of places, and then kill it on the altar to a foreign god. What? Now, okay. It gets better. After he kills a pig on the altar, this guy starts making laws. He says you can't circumcise your kids. You can't follow most of the laws that are listed in the Torah. You have to. It is mandatory. Listen. This is crazy. This is great. I hadn't brushed up on this in a while, and I was giggling as I was recounting all this because I'm like, that's right. I can't believe this guy did this. Antiochus, he literally lines the Jews up in the city and says, you need to sacrifice to Zeus pigs. He rounds a bunch of pigs up, rounds a bunch of Jews up, and says, you need to kill the pigs and sacrifice them to Zeus. Okay? He actually does this to a whole town. He goes to this place called Modine. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm too far. First off, he does this whole pig thing himself, and then he starts forcing other people to do this pig thing. And one guy, his name's Eleazar, good Jew, priest. And he's like, this is wrong. And Antiochus gets word of this. He gets wind, and he gets in this guy's face, and he says, here, you have to eat this pig. Bacon for you. And he won't do it. The priest, the good Jew, Eleazar, won't do it. And Antiochus straight up murders the dude, executes him. Oh, you want to talk about winning the populace. Then there's a woman down the street named Hannah. She's got 7 sons. He goes down the street to Hannah with her 7 sons and says, you all need to kill a pig and sacrifice to Zeus. And she's like, nope. And her 7 sons are like, nope. And he executes them publicly, one by one. I mean, dang. This guy could not, in a more forceful way, be throwing it in the undermining, outlawing, and denying the very fabric of what it means to be Jewish. This isn't just simply about eating a little bit of bacon. This is saying you are no longer Jewish. And Eleazar and Hannah and her sons become national martyrs. And word gets round to all the Jews everywhere that persecution has broken out, and the populace hates. It's been boiling and boiling and boiling. Finally, it boils over. Boils over in a city called Modin, where he sends his soldiers. Antiochus sends his soldiers, and they go to this city called Modin, and they line everybody up, and they bring a bunch of pigs in, and they say, you have to slaughter a pig, each and every single person, so to the god Zeus. And one guy, Mattathias, who is also a priest and has a bunch of sons, stands up and says, heck no. Enough is enough. Forget it. No more. And he launches a revolt. Him and his sons, Mattathias and his sons, head off into the hills, and the farmers start going there, and the townspeople start going there, and they specialize in guerrilla warfare. They become the zealots. They become these war-oriented Jewish people who believe that the only way to preserve the Jewish identity and way of life is throwing off alien rule, throwing off alien empires, getting rid of the pagans, and becoming an independent Jewish state once more. This is known as the Maccabean Revolt. You ever heard that term before? Maccabean? The Maccabean Revolt. It happens in 168 BCE. The Maccabean Revolt. And this is a big deal. It's called the Maccabean Revolt because the guy who comes to the center point is actually not Mattathias, but his son Judas. Judas is nicknamed the Hammer. Isn't that great? The Hammer. Which is also the Maccabee because of translation pieces in language. So it becomes known as kind of like the Hammer's Revolt, if you will. The Maccabean Revolt. Judas actually turns out to be a military guerrilla warfare mastermind, and he starts owning the local government and armies. He undermines them at every chance he can. Ancient Israel and today contemporary Israel is very hilly. It's a very hilly. It's got lots of valleys and boulders and things like that. And basically, he lives in the hill country, sabotaging, stealing grain, hitting military movement of supplies. He starts raiding different towns for different reasons, and the populace love him. I mean, love him. So the Maccabean Revolt starts to get some huge momentum behind it because Antiochus has, the Seleucid guy, Antiochus, he has upset the entire country. And so the whole country rallies around this Judas Maccabean and his family, Mattathias' sons. And eventually, Judas marches an army all the way to Jerusalem and lays siege to Jerusalem. And he wins. Whoa. Judas and the Maccabean Revolt actually works. This is, guys, this is mind-blowing. The Maccabean Revolt, to establish an independent Jewish state, actually works. I mean, think about it. For the last, 700 or so years, foreign empires, one after another, has been in control. I mean, could you imagine 700 years, 7 centuries of foreign occupation? Not to mention, if you go back further than that, but you go a little further back and you're into tribal warfare and all sorts of violence, right? 700 years, the Jews have not been able to establish themselves as an independent, self-governed, autonomous Jewish state, and all of a sudden, Judas Maccabean manages to do it. Many people believed that he was, in fact, the Messiah. Tons of people. Tons of the Jewish people believed Judas Maccabean was the Messiah. Why? Well, because he is reestablishing the Davidic kingdom, independent and autonomous from all the other places, all the other foreign empires. A lot of people thought that Judas Maccabean was the Messiah. Violent, brilliant general. He comes into Jerusalem and he wipes out the Greek influence. He immediately gets rid of all the nasty Greek stuff that had infected the town, the city. But he can't worship right away. It sounds silly, but he actually can't worship right away because the temple itself has to be cleansed, ritually cleansed. So there's this process by which the temple is rededicated. The temple itself has to be rededicated. And there's this big deal because they don't have enough oil to rededicate the temple. So they light a menorah, assuming that the oil will be done. There's enough oil for like one day. That for them to do this ritual process, to rededicate the temple, to restore it to its former glory, to have God's presence come back into it, they're going to do this ritual, but they only have a little bit of oil when they need a whole lot. But they light the menorah anyways with the oil they have. And tradition has it that the oil lasts through the night, and the next night, and the next night, and the next night. 8 days. The oil burns in a supernatural miracle. That's what tradition says. This is where you get the Jewish holiday. Anyone know? Put it in the comments. What Jewish holiday stems from this story? It has to do with a menorah, 8 crazy nights, as Adam Sandler would say. It is the Jewish holiday that happens around the same time as when Christians celebrate Christmas. Hey-o! Yep. Good job. You guys can see it. That is correct. This is Hanukkah. This is where the story of Hanukkah comes from. It's grounded in the Maccabean Revolt. Hanukkah. Hanukkah stems from the story in which Judas Maccabean rededicates the temple, and it actually echoes. It's a powerful festival in Jewish tradition because it represents more than just a supernatural event of oil lasting. This is regarded by the Jewish people as a moment where the Jewish people fought and won for their own preservation, self-determination, and autonomy, where a small Jewish army was able to throw off the bondage and the chains of the strong and imposing world superpower that is not Jewish, pagan. So this is huge. And in fact, in the Gospel of John, this is referred to. Jesus is traveling through Jerusalem at the time of this festival, Hanukkah. The festival of rededication, I believe, is what it is in John. I remember reading that earlier. So fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Well, okay. So Judas Maccabean and the Maccabean Revolt works. And for the first time, there is an independent Jewish city-state that gets established in 165 BCE. Okay? And it actually, does kind of okay. Sorta. It is often referred to, what the Maccabean Revolt gets referred to then as the Hasmonean Dynasty. That's the family name. The Hasmonean Dynasty gets established. Under the Hasmoneans, it grows. The size of the influence expands territorially. It expands. There are brothers, and it stays within a family. But not surprisingly, like all broken people, there are things that they do well, and then there are people who don't like what they're doing. So even as they're growing and expanding ancient Israel and the territory of ancient Israel as they have established it, they come under the scrutiny. Now that they have thrown off the oppressors, they come under the scrutiny of various Jewish sects. Okay? Within ancient Judaism, there are different groups. Some of the groups everybody's glad that the foreigners are gone, but not everybody likes still the Hasmoneans, the Jewish family that's ruling. So, as an example for you, the Hasmoneans, in order to throw off the oppressors, they say that it's okay to fight on the Sabbath. At first, they say we can't fight on the Sabbath. The Sabbath is a day of rest. And then an army of Seleucids comes in and wipes out a whole bunch of them. And then they say, no, it's okay for us to fight on the Sabbath now. That would be okay. And so that's what happens. They start fighting on the Sabbath. Well, time passes, and now that the foreigners are gone, people are looking back saying, we shouldn't have done that. The Hasmoneans end up being and causing difficulties for the Pharisees. Whoop. Pharisees. That's right. The Pharisees. The Pharisees that you get by the time you get to Jesus are these Pharisees. Their emphasis is on the Torah, the Bible, both written and oral tradition. Generally speaking, the Pharisees would be considered a little bit more, I'm even hesitant to use this word, but generally speaking, they would be considered more liberal in their use and application, because they not only accept the written law, but oral tradition as well. They're not so hot on military expansion, and the Hasmoneans do something that they are not on board with. Namely, they consolidate the monarchy. The Hasmonean guy in charge also becomes lead high priest. So he brings the office of priest and the office of king together. Historically, in the Jewish world, that's a no-no. The only person who's supposed to be able to do that is the Messiah himself. Historically, the king always has a priest, but the offices are separate. The Hasmoneans bring it together. The other thing the Hasmoneans do is something called forced conversions. They start, in order to expand their territory, to annex more land. For example, they go down south to an area called Idumea. If you go all the way back, it's Edom, the Edomites, which has its roots in Esau. This is going way, way back. Esau, the brother of Jacob. But the Hasmoneans go to Idumea and annex it. And then they force all of the residents to become Jewish the way that they are. Later on, a guy named Herod. Herod is from this territory, from Idumea. And part of the reason why the Jewish people don't accept Herod is because he comes from an area and a territory that was part of a forced conversion. He is not a real Jew as far as the Jews are concerned. They also annex Samaria. Now, if you remember, Samaria's got a whole lot of baggage too, right? Why? Because Samaria has to do with the northern kingdom when the Assyrian Empire dragged off the tribes and replaced them with their own people, mixing Jewish blood with foreigner blood. So Samaria is a bunch of descendants of impure Jewish blood. The Hasmoneans annex and simply declare themselves now rulers of Samaria and force them all to become Jewish. This causes problems with traditional Jewish Pharisees who say you can't do that. Like that's against the Torah. You can't just force people to conversion. That doesn't jive with the Jewish faith. Well, the Hasmoneans team up with another group called the Sadducees to oppose the Pharisees. The Sadducees agree on the written Torah only and do not accept the oral tradition. They are at odds with the Pharisees, and so the Hasmoneans and the Sadducees throw in together, and then you have the Pharisees. All this to say, eventually, tensions rise religiously, politically, and there are one or two small civil wars that occur in the Jewish nation state. In the midst of these Jewish civil wars, another empire from the west comes a-knockin'. Any ideas? What big Western empire shows up when the Hasmonean dynasty is having all of its issues and troubles and civil wars? Any guesses? I'm going to eat one of these. I'm eating a Stroopwafel. These things are so good. While you guys think of what big empire comes after eating me a Stroopwafel. At the forefront is a guy named Pompey. Ever heard of Pompey? Pompey comes a-walking and a-knocking. There we go. Thank you. These are good. Here they come. Dum 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 dum. They are on the rise right now, out west. The Romans. Pompey is a conqueror. It is still technically a republic right now, but it's on the edge. It's not the empire that will come under Julius Caesar, but under Pompey, there's mass expansion. And Pompey teams up with one of the Hasmonean entities. In the midst of a civil war between two brothers, he teams up with one of the brothers. And he says, look, I'll conquer Judea for you. That's, by this time, it's known as Judea. I'll conquer Judea, which is Jerusalem and this small kingdom of Judea. I'll conquer Judea for you with the caveat that you become a Roman province. The Hasmonean brother says, all right, I ain't got much choice. I ain't got my own army. So, Pompey besieges Jerusalem and wins. From that time on, ancient Jerusalem, ancient Israel, and all the land, all the area that the Hasmonean dynasty had established, the independent Jewish state all of a sudden becomes a Roman province. It is in that Roman province that a Jewish boy will enter the world to save the world. So, this is all recorded in 4 books that got spliced down to 2 books. Books 1 and 2 became book 1. Books 3 and 4 became book 2. They are known as 1st and 2nd Maccabees. You guys ever heard of 1st and 2nd Maccabees? They are, sometimes the fancy word is apocryphal. If you're Protestant or non-Roman Catholic, we would use the term apocryphal. Protestants don't believe that these stories are inspired by the Holy Spirit per se, that they are not the inspired canon, but they are still helpful, useful, and positive. They are good and have to do with our Jewish history, tradition, so forth. Roman Catholicism actually do believe them to be inspired. And so if you pick up a Bible that specifically says Roman Catholic or Catholic Bible, you will have 2 books in there, 1st and 2nd Maccabees. If you are a Protestant or non-Roman Catholic, you will have, and not like Eastern Orthodox or anything. No, they are not Gnostic. Good question mark. These are technically not Gnostic. No. Really good question. Gnostic's another ballgame. These books, the Apocrypha, are books that are good. I'm a Protestant, so I'm showing my bias. They're books that are good, right, helpful for instruction, understanding. They are edifying. They are just not at the same level that you're going to find as the Gospels. They will not do in your head and your heart what the canon can do in your head and heart. They are helpful. They are instructional. They are positive. They're about the Jews, though. They're not about God. That's the difference. They're about the Jewish revolt. They're about the Maccabean Revolt. And so what centerpiece is less God's activity and more the activity of the Maccabees. So 1st and 2nd Maccabees is really helpful and instructional. And if you buy like a Catholic Bible, it will just be in there. If you have a Protestant background, you actually have to find a Bible that says with Apocrypha in order to have 1st and 2nd Maccabees. Well, there you go, guys. This literally brings us up to the time that Rome is now in charge. You can see, and what's probably the highlight to name as we get ready to dive into the New Testament is to say, can you just feel how much conflict, messiness, diversity? Can you feel the plurality of values, religions, worldviews that are all concentrated in ancient Israel when Jesus explodes on the scene? He doesn't explode on the scene. He whispers onto the scene. I mean, that's part of it. He's not a flash in the pan. He's a quiet whisper that enters the world. And that's in part because the world has been just so chaotic and so dang messy and loud itself. Jesus enters at a time of conflict, a time where the Jewish people are confused because they just thought they had established the kingdom once again, and they found that their earthly kingdom didn't last. And so their concept of Messiah, which we'll talk about next week, is deeply shaped by all these empires and the worldviews that these empires brought. The answer to the original question at the very beginning, was it bacon, Zeus, or aliens? It's a trick question. The answer is all three. All three. And because it has to do with the Jewish people dealing with the larger world. And how are they going to navigate? How are they going to be Jewish in a world that keeps changing so rapidly and imposing itself on the Jewish identity and way of life? There you go. How about that for intertestamental period? Huh? Kind of fun? Any surprises for you? Anything that you guys were... Any questions you guys got? Anything that you were surprised by, intrigued by, didn't know about? You guys ever hear of the Maccabean Revolt before? You guys ever hear of that? The Maccabean Revolt is one of those things that you got to be pretty deep into our world and our world. You have to be deep into the Christian history or Jewish history to get somebody actually to teach on it. It's not something that you're going to find a lot out there on. You have to dive into the history of Hanukkah to really get much information on it. But it is an important part of the story and shapes a great deal of the world that Jesus came into. Yeah. Yes, CCD. You touched on it in CCD. Absolutely. If you're Catholic in your backdrop, you probably touched on this because of those books, because of 1st and 2nd Maccabees takes a place in the canon for those of you who are Catholic. Love it. Love it. Totally, man. Well, there you go, guys. Having fun on a Tuesday night. Hope you enjoyed Tuesday night teaching. It's so fun to hang out with you guys. Thanks for being part of the online community, everybody. Appreciate being able to hang with y'all and have some good tea and nerd out on some ancient historical Bible stuff. And hey, not only can you hang out with me on Tuesday nights, but hang out with me on Sunday mornings. We're in a sermon series right now, Jesus in His Own Words. Hopefully you're in an Easter group or something like that. But tune in online, tune in on site, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10:30. You're stuck with me preaching for a couple weeks as we're going through the I am statements with Jesus in the Gospel of John. And as always, I enjoy hanging out with you on Tuesday nights, but don't forget, I'm also tuning in on Thursday mornings, 7:30 a.m. on Thursday mornings. We do something totally different. We do something called Thursday Morning Meditation, where we pull what we experienced on Sunday morning into the rest of our week. We do prayer, we do scripture, and we do Holy Spirit shout-outs is what we do on Thursday mornings. So, thanks for tuning in tonight. Hopefully that was instructional, encouraging. Hope that was, if nothing else, tickled your historical need and it got you excited to get ready for Jesus and the New Testament. We're going to dive into that. That's what's in front of us. That's going to be great as we get ready for Easter. As we dive into the Easter story, we are going to be coinciding with what we're studying on Tuesday nights. So thank you so much. Thanks for hanging out, guys. God bless each and every one of you. Go lift lives. Go elevate Christ. Go be a church for those who aren't here yet. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Trudy. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, other Joe. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you. And if I missed you, I'm sorry. Thank you, Pam and Aaron. I think that's everybody that commented. Thanks, guys, for being here tonight. Hopefully it was a blessing to you all. Have a wonderful rest of your night, and we'll see and talk to you all soon. Thanks, guys.